Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your other host this week is Matt. Welcome back, Matt.
Happy New Year.
That's right. Happy New Year. You're helping us kick off and end a year, 2 years here, so 2022, and then going into 2023. But if this is your very first podcast of our episode or of our show, the way we format it is we go through this week's news and then we end it with the Brokehead Block, which is the more personal side of the show, what Matt and I have been up to since you last heard us. And this week we do have some end of year summaries or best of, worst of that we're going to cover. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 542. So first on the video game side, in a reply to the UK Competition and Markets Authority back in October, Microsoft has stated that Sony has permanently blocked popular titles such as Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy XIV, Bloodborne, Silent Hill 2, the remaster, from coming to the Xbox. So big baby Sony, once again, being giant babies and showing it off with these blocks. Microsoft, in turn, will be making 3 upcoming Bethesda games. This is the right response. And most likely Starfield, Redfall, and another unknown title. Those are going to be Xbox and PC exclusives. So Sony has brought this on to themselves. Microsoft still wants to demonstrate that its multi-platform commitment is still true by bringing Call of Duty to the Nintendo Switch and Steam. We had previously covered that Nintendo and Steam both have no issue. Valve have no issue with the Call of Duty commitment. They agreed to it. And Microsoft extended the same deal to Sony, but to no avail. Right now, the deal is expected to be completed in 6 months, pending regulatory approval. So by June. So what do you think about Sony kind of still ramping up this blockage of merger between Microsoft and Activision, really being the only company that has an issue with it?
Who didn't see this coming? I'm sure Microsoft was planning on, like, they were going to expect some challenges that Sony was obviously going to be hurt. I think it was actually commendable from a fan and corporate standpoint that they wanted to include Sony, that they still wanted to be a developer for them. But at the same time, I can imagine, Sony's looking at it like, I'm McDonald's and I'm going to let Burger King give me a sandwich.
Well, and that's the thing. They're still, I don't know why they don't want to be a part of the deal. I mean, aside from the whole, I guess, worry that they won't be, what Sony wants is they want an indefinite deal. They want a promise us on written paper that you're going to have Call of Duty on our systems from now until the end of time. And Microsoft is going, we'll give you a 10-year deal because we don't know what the console landscape is going to look like in 10 years. And then we'll revisit that deal in a decade if sales are still viable on your system. And if they're not, then it doesn't make sense to spend that development time on extra consoles.
Yeah, that's smart business.
So I know some of our hosts here, like Bobby, he doesn't think it's going to go through. Maceo and I think it's going to go through. Let's get your take, Matt. Do you think that, we know the FTC is supposedly against this merger, and I've stated before a number of times that this is all just a play for them to do a little victory lap, like Michael Pachter also said, of look what we made Microsoft do because we're the FTC and we're doing our job. And Microsoft is going, this is what we wanted to do the whole time, is make a contract that will say that Sony consoles are going to have Call of Duty for the next 10 years. But do you think that this Activision Blizzard and Microsoft merger will happen, or do you think it won't?
I think it'll happen. I can see, like, Microsoft has obviously, had, the scrutiny of not just the FCC, but Congress, like back before, Apple introduced the iPhone, before their PowerBooks and iMacs and the iPads, basically rewrote the market. There was a antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft, for Windows and its dominance with PCs, and they've had the attention and scrutiny of the federal government before. So I can see why there might be a little bit deeper look into this, but I think at the end of the day, it's gonna happen. The only thing that would make me think that would have stopped it if, like, Disney hadn't been allowed to buy most of 20th Century Fox. If Discovery hadn't been allowed to, merge, buy up, Warner Brothers Media. So there's all these mega huge mergers that have been happening the last few years, and I don't see this one being the one that's gets stopped.
I agree with you. I do think that there is a difference. Under the previous presidential administration, under Trump, a lot of these deals were going through much easier. And now under the current administration, there is more of a pushback against these mergers. I think if this merger had occurred during the previous presidential position, this would have gone through no problem. But now they're scrutinizing more. This new administration is scrutinizing these deals a little bit harder. Now, me being a Microsoft fan, I'm like, just let it go through. And I do think it will. And it sounds like you also believe it will go through. It's just a matter of, again, just show and tell, right? Just showing, look, we're doing our job, and then get something on paper saying that Microsoft will have shit on Sony stuff, and that'll be then the merger will go through. Sony will continue crying about it, but they'll have Call of Duty on their systems, and it won't be an issue.
I think Sony knows it's gonna happen, and I think this is just a stalling tactic. So the longer they can prevent it from happening, that's the less time that's more time they have to come up with something else, some answer to the games that they're going to be losing or they're choosing not to have. And Microsoft will have more time in being able to release something else from this merger.
If the Brokehead on the other side has been paying attention to our Discord, Maceo and I have a bet against Bobby over this merger. We think it will happen. He doesn't think it will happen. There's no timetable on this. It's just a will it pass or won't it pass? And obviously June is the deadline on when this deal can be or should be completed by as far as an approval. And we will continue to cover it right here as we get apparently weekly news on this deal. And I'm liking it so far. I'm enjoying what's happening. And again, this is specifically this week about for the U.S. merger. Obviously, there's different laws happening in the U.K. It's a lot slower in Europe, I believe, as far as this merger. There's a lot. That one's going to take a little bit longer. But here in the U.S., as we said, I do think it will happen by June 2023. And here's an interesting possible change to how trailers are put together, how they're treated. In January 2022, it was revealed that two fans of actress Ana de Armas from No Time to Die were filing a lawsuit against Universal Pictures, alleging that her image being used in the trailer from the 2019 movie Yesterday, from which she had been cut, tricked them into renting the movie. So Universal's trailer for Yesterday was defined as, quote, commercial speech, end quote, by the judge last month, and could fall under California false advertising law. So this class action lawsuit surrounding the trailer for the movie will move towards a trial. So if the plaintiffs win, what do you think this could mean for the future of trailers and for future cuts of films?
You'll get a disclaimer either at the beginning of the trailer, or you'll get a fast talking or voiceover guy at the end, like you have on car commercials, that just makes a disclaimer that depicted in this trailer may not actually appear in the movie. That's as far as it's going to go. As long as they put a disclaimer on there that people can hear or see. Just because, I get what they're saying, but one, it's kind of ridiculous that one actress was your sole reason for renting Yesterday, not the premise of the movie at all. And it's common. It's been as long as trailers have been a thing. Like they're often made with footage that while the movie's still in production, they have a loose idea of what the movie is. Their idea is to assemble scenes and tell a story, and it happens a lot where that story doesn't resemble what's in the movie. Sometimes they cut it to make it look more appealing, and you've seen people recut trailers online where they take like a comedy and recut the trailer to look like it's a horror movie. It's all about manipulation and selling an idea, and to get butts in the seats. Now, they're not selling you a car that suddenly breaks down. And even if she had been in that movie, she'd only been in that movie for like a scene. Would you have been just as disappointed? Like the trailer made it seem like she was going to be in the whole movie, like she was only in one scene. I think it's just going to be a disclaimer, and that gets tacked on at most.
Yeah, if there is a disclaimer before the film, that would obviously protect the filmmakers from any kind of monetary loss in the future, because this would be the case in which they can point to and say, hey, you got to have something in front of the film just so people know that it may not be the movie all these scenes may not be in the film. What we're trying to sell you, these previews of the movie, may not be in there. Or let's take it even further. What if the judge says, no, there's some kind of law, anything you have in the trailer has to be in the film. So all of a sudden, you got to make sure that all of those scenes from the trailer, let's take the David Ayer Suicide Squad, for example. There was a lot of scenes of Joker with half his face blown off that were in the trailer that ended up not being in the film. Mm-hmm. So in future films, these studios would have to be like, okay, now we got to make sure that scene, or at least that clip, is in the movie in some way. So that would have to be a lot more careful about how they assemble these trailers, and probably be further along as far as the production process before they put out a movie. And then what happens if there's reshoots, right? Would they have to put out another disclaimer saying previous trailers are no longer applicable to these films? This is the following trailer now.
That's why I say it's probably just going to be a disclaimer that they put in the front of the trailer or at the back end of the trailer, because, the movie marketing machines, they're marketing movies for a year, 2 years for something that they know they've only got a month to 6 weeks to make their money back on,
right?
In the theaters. So I don't see them. Marvel's like the only studio that has typically been running their trailers to very close to the release, because they don't want it to detract from the next movie that comes out, because they release a movie like 3-4 movies a year, at a decent clip plus their shows. So they're like Thor, the most recent, like Love and Thunder, they didn't release a trailer for that until, I think like 6 weeks before the movie came out. But you got campaigns built upon like multiple trailers. It has like your teaser, that's like a year and a half out from the movie. You've got your big announcement trailer. Then you've got your, next trailer that's like a minute and a half that's like Super Bowl size. And then, your final trailer it's kind of like a hodgepodge of the 2 trailers plus an additional scene that comes out like the month before the movie. So I don't see, like, Hollywood's going to find their way. They've got a creative accounting. They're going to find a creative way around how to, present trailers that have footage in there that might not end up in the movie.
And I do totally sympathize with the plaintiffs, because there are films that I've seen only because of an actor. There's Liam Neeson movies. Most of those I would not have seen if it had been any other actor. I go and see it for Liam Neeson or Ben Affleck's current films. Aronofsky, he's a director that I'll see his films regardless of who's in the movie. So I totally understand that. And I've been fooled before by trailers that sell me a certain version of a film, and then there's a completely different tone on it. I already touched on Suicide Squad, and Justice League is another big one, but you heard it here on the show. Anchorman, yeah. On the show years ago, Kelly and I were talking about Man of Steel and that first trailer back during the Christopher Nolan era. And it was almost a Batman Begins teaser-like trailer for Man of Steel. And there's this voiceover by Kevin Costner, and the whole film is very subtle in the way it's presenting its movie, very almost like heady, like you'd have to analyze this movie. And then you see the film, and it is a spectacular action film, but I remember being disappointed on the first watch of it, because I'm like, whoa, I thought this was going to be like something completely different, something a lot more. And now I know that there's a ton of setup in the film. There's a lot to dissect, and there's a bunch of payoffs in that film and in later films that people are still discovering. But at that time, I'm like, this is not the movie from the trailer. This is not the steady cam. This is not the slow-mo that I'm used to from Zach or from the trailer. This is more a spectacle, right? This is a Superman film that people demanded at the time of Superman Returns. That's too boring, too safe, whatever. Okay, so they brought on Zach, and he gave us Man of Steel. And so I totally understand that. But do you think that if this goes in the plaintiff's way, and this is the last thing I'll ask you about this, is would it then affect previous films? So, for example, David Ayer Suicide Squad, of putting pressure on the studios like, hey, you had this trailer that had the Joker in it, and the film doesn't have these scenes. Do you think any studios would then be backlogged, pressured into releasing certain cuts of films?
No, I don't. It's not something that's going to be like retroactive. I don't think it's going to be whatever the judgment is, or whenever this movie or whenever this judgment happens, it's going to be whatever's after that. There's too many movies before that. Like there'd be endless lawsuits. I mean,
Yeah.
my, just from like the Avengers movies, Endgame and Infinity War, like they purposely put scenes in that movie that like definitely did not have alternate versions happen in the movie. Like famously, the Hulk showed up in in the trailer for Endgame or Infinity War, and he was not in that scene. It was the Hulkbuster version of Banner, in the Iron Man suit that was in that scene. That's just one of many scenes. So like that's a misdirect. They're still selling you the idea of the movie, but they're not giving you the exact scene. So I think at most it's going to be a disclaimer, and that's it.
I love that when people bring up that Hulk thing, because they even had a toy where Banner, the Hulk, would transform in the Buster armor and then bust out of there, and it'd be the Hulk. And from what I understand, the rumor is that they were in deep negotiations with Universal over using the Hulk more in the film, but the price tag to using the character was too high for Disney. So that's when they went with the Iron Hulkbuster, I think it was. It was basically a swap of that originally was the Hulk's body, and then they swapped it with the Hulkbuster because that's something that they can use that I guess belonged to Disney as far as the rights. But I think that toy's still out there somewhere. Speaking of Marvel, there's some changes happening to Daredevil as Daredevil Born Again star Charlie Cox has warned fans that the upcoming Disney Plus series may not be rated TVMA, despite reports suggesting otherwise. So Cox is aware that some Marvel fans may be disappointed to hear that the tone of Born Again won't be the same as the Netflix series. He said, quote, "I would say to those people, we've done that. Let's take the things that really worked, but can we broaden? Can we appeal to a slightly younger audience without losing what we've learned about what works?" End quote. So I stopped watching Daredevil after season 1, and it had nothing to do with the tone of the show. It had to do with certain characters, specifically Kingpin, going through a radical change by the end, and that was my favorite character. But I'm assuming you kept up with Daredevil, and if you have, what do you think about this change of tone that they're going to go with? Which, from what I understand, they've already shown some of this in She-Hulk.
Yeah, I mean, of the 3 seasons of Daredevil that were on Netflix, the first and last I thought were near perfect. They were excellent. The second season was a bit overpacked. They were trying to do too much story in there, I thought. But overall, like the quality of the show was great. But we did get like, a very down, very beaten up, very gritty Daredevil for 3 seasons, and Daredevil has been more than that in his comic book, lifetime. I mean, when Mark Waid did a run on him, they did a more fun and happy-go-lucky Daredevil. That was more of like the swashbuckling kind of heroes type. So the Daredevil we got in She-Hulk was definitely lighter in tone, but he's progressed from where we last saw him. He may be on a better path, more optimistic, and he definitely seemed lighter, but he was still kicking ass. It was great seeing Charlie Cox back, and I'm glad that he's back. He was a great Daredevil, and I don't have any reason to doubt that it's going to be a bad show. Like I know your feelings on Marvel. Like I like a lot of what they put out. It kind of hits me in the live where I'm reading a Marvel comic book zone, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm not looking for reasons to not like it at this point. I feel like it's going to be a good product for people who like the Marvel stuff.
I obviously have no horse in this race, and I'm not going to be watching it whether or not it did have that mature tone, because again, that wasn't my issue with that show. But I can't help but equate this almost to the Henry Cavill thing. Like if I were the way I kind of want to put myself in the shoes of those fans that are worried about this, I totally empathize with it, because it's very much like when they brought back Henry Cavill for Bland Adam, and they went with Justice League's version of Superman. He's back in the red and blue, and you could even say Justice League. That version, they went with a lighter tone, a more MCU-like Superman, and very different from what they had established in Man of Steel. So that's why me as a fan, I had a problem with it, because it's like, this isn't what you established back over here. This is the character I fell in love with. This is the character I like. This is the story I'm following. And to see that major change, it's like, okay, I'm no longer your audience then. You're now no longer catering to me. So I totally can see why some Daredevil fans that are a fan of Netflix's production of that are now almost in that same boat of, whoa, hold on, this isn't the Daredevil that we watched. This is not the one I like. And yes, until that comes out, maybe then they should check it out or not check it out. I get it. But if it ends up being a much lighter Daredevil, like it sounds like it is, and we called it, people on Twitter were like, it's going to be an MCU Daredevil from now on. And that seems like that's what's happening. They're prepping that audience for it. However, I don't think this will be as big a backlash as the Henry Cavill Superman thing, simply because honestly, I don't think there's as many fans of Charlie Cox's Daredevil as there were Henry Cavill's. And also, it seems like MCU fans are less on the less jaded than DCEU fans are right now. But if any of you do end up watching, actually, Matt, next time you're on, let me know what you think of it. But others that are also on the worried side of Born Again, if you end up watching this show, which I'm not sure when it premieres, but if you watch it, let us know how different it is from the Netflix series, which I did see those clips from She-Hulk, and I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty different Daredevil, but it's a different studio behind it completely.
I don't think it comes out until it hasn't even started filming yet. I think it's supposed to be either late 2023 or 2024, but they're going to have an 18 episode run, which is a longer season than any of the 3 Netflix seasons were.
Are they still going to be 40-minute formats like the Netflix one, or a little bit shorter? I don't know how the Disney Plus shows have been.
I think they're gonna be flexible in episode length, because like some of the as far as like all the Marvel shows so far, overall each series has been around the same length, but some of the episodes will be like an hour, some will be half an hour. But so like the episode length might be deceptive in that 18 episodes, but it might equate to like 13 hours, or something like that. So I don't think it's going to be 13-hour-long episodes, but I think there'll be some that are shorter, some that are longer, kind of like The Mandalorian or any of the Star Wars shows, where they let the story, like the episode, be as long as the story needs for that episode.
All right, very good. So for better or for worse, we'll find out. Charlie Cox will be returning, so we'll get more of that content. And in what could have been churn for Warner Brothers Discovery, a new report from the New York Post suggested that Joker director Todd Phillips was also among the contenders for the head of DC Studios. So an insider told the New York Post, quote, "The whole town turned the job down. It was almost Todd Phillips. They begged him. Gunn has never run anything. I wonder if big filmmakers will work for another director with zero experience guiding movies through a huge grinder of a system. He's not Kevin Feige," end quote. So this is something that Maceo said a couple weeks back, that it felt like Gunn was almost the bottom of the barrel pick. There were these rumors of people like Dan Lin turning down the role. Kevin Feige himself turned down the role. And now we're finding out that Todd Phillips himself said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take that position. So they finally went all the way down, it sounds like, to James Gunn.
I think we both talked before about how like Todd Phillips would have been a very interesting choice. And I think he could have done some very interesting things with that. With James Gunn, where obviously they're trying to go in the Marvel direction. And for, I hate to say it, Zaslav's point of view, who's got a lot of debt to clear, if he's at this point, he's trying to look at what works. And, Marvel has a system that works. Do I want the DCU to be just like Marvel? No. But if I'm in charge of trying to clear $50 billion worth of debt, I got to look at what sells and try to emulate that as best I can, especially with hasn't worked to the way that previous management wanted. But I feel like that's more of a management problem, not an artistic vision problem. And Gunn makes sense from the standpoint of, well, he's worked in both systems and he's had success in both systems. Definitely not with the Suicide Squad movie, commercially, but that was critically well received, and the Peacemaker series was critically well received and turned numbers for HBO Max. I personally liked it, and I didn't think it felt like it had a personal touch in there, a lot like some of the personal stuff in Guardians of the Galaxy does. It makes sense for him to be like a creative head, but as far as like running through the system, you're right. He hasn't like run a lot of stuff through the system. He has produced lower, like smaller films, like he did a dark version. He produced dark version of Superman with Brightburn, which I thought was fantastic. But it seems like at this point, like Warner Brothers was looking for something that would grab attention, that they thought was would get the attention of, I think, Marvel fanboys that think that Marvel can't do anything wrong, and I think Todd Phillips would have been the better choice, just from a creative standpoint. I think he would have been really good, allowing for some very different, unique takes on characters. But I mean, I'm not gonna poo-poo Gunn overall until I see really what he's got, because right now people are just reacting to rumors and inevitable changes we knew were going to happen, for good or bad. But be interested in seeing what he has first before I'm gonna say, oh no, he was the wrong choice. Right now I'm gonna say he's a safe choice.
Well, a bunch of the changes, I was going to say a pedo as a safe choice. I don't know about that one, but
I mean, I won't get into all that.
But yeah, he hasn't run, like the quote here said. He's not a Kevin Feige. He hasn't done this, and you stated that already, which is I get that, and it's some of these choices though have already been controversial. I know he's already alienated the Henry Cavill fan base because of. And they were in for like Man of Steel 2, regardless of who makes it. They didn't care if it was Zack Snyder or not. They just wanted Henry Cavill Superman. And with him firing him or not bringing him onto the 10-year plan, saying, look, we're going to start off fresh, we're going to reboot, that fan base completely now is like against Warner Brothers Discovery. So there's been some controversial decisions already.
Yeah, I'm sad about that one.
What I'm curious about is if Todd Phillips, just to keep it on the subject for him, if he was approached to lead this 10-year plan or whatever it was that they offered him at that point, the creative decision. And yes, he's also not a Kevin Feige, so I would totally, and I don't blame Todd Phillips for turning this down for many reasons, but if one of them is, look, I'm not a Feige. Yes, I wanted to do DC Black Label, and I would have been happy to do that, and I'll still do that, but I'm not going to run a whole PG-13 plus division for you. If that was the reason, great. But do you think they approached him with the thought of, okay, can you emulate the MCU on our side? Or do you think they approached him and Dan Lin or whomever else with, what is your plan? Pitch us your 10-year plan, and then we'll discuss bringing you on or not.
I think Todd wants to stay more behind the camera. I feel like he's a filmmaker who feels like his voice is in the writing and directing and like putting together like a movie. Like he wants to nurture one thing. I don't think he has the appetite for a whole studio system of what you'd have to. I think he's looking at, if he took on that Kevin Feige role, that his days of telling like a dark or gritty story, like telling any story that he wants to do, are gone for the foreseeable future. And I think he wants to tell the stories that he wants to tell, and not tell the stories that a balance sheet tells him to tell.
And if he had gotten picked, let's pretend that he was the head of DC and we'd be talking about this right now, would we have gotten you're talking about creative changes, a more interesting creative path? Do you think it would have been a more mature take on some of these characters and some of these films as opposed to what we may get from James Gunn?
Yes, I feel like it wouldn't be the Snyderverse, but I feel like it would be closer to that than what we're going to get with Gunn. I feel like he would have found, like, if he agreed to it and the mandate was, whatever you do, we want a cohesive universe. I feel like it wouldn't have been that much of a stretch to tie in, to like make his Joker movies fit into the world that was in Matt Reeves as the Batman. I don't think it wouldn't have taken that much connective tissue to make that work. Because remember I know we saw like the cut scenes for the Joker from that movie, but we really didn't see him. And they could have been a completely different Joker inspired by Joaquin Phoenix's. But I don't think it would have taken that much connective tissue. I think he would have. I feel like he would have done a very mature Superman, but I think he would have picked people whose sensibilities were closer to his own, like a more auteur vision. Like, I mean, he could have been the producer that he probably could have gotten Zack Snyder to come back. But, and I think there would have been a room for more experimentation, because, he got like, as far as like big movies go, he got next to no money for making the Joker, and it won awards, and it made $1 billion. So I think he wanted a little bit more freedom than I think he wasn't going to have
Right.
running a whole division.
Yeah, it could have easily turned into another situation of let's hit the panic button and not do that, not go in that direction, Todd, and go somewhere in a different direction after a certain backlash. Who knows what could have happened? A lot of what ifs, but I can tell you, while I may still have been boycotting Warner Brothers Discovery with that decision, I don't know, it would have been a whole different story, but I definitely wouldn't have been as against the slate of films as I am now, just because I know I don't like James Gunn's direction. I don't like him running any of these things or his past as well. I guess I got to start saying alleged, right? 'Cause I'm getting a lot of attention from James Gunn fans online, so I got to start saying alleged. All of that stuff. I would have been less against that direction, but it's just interesting to see that we almost had Todd Phillips, which I would have been like, oh shit, cool, a little bit better, not too bad. And we do have some of the future of the last bit of this regime that is already gone. But Shazam 2 star Zachary Levi is the latest to weigh in on the speculation that he'll be next to get let go from DC Studios. This was all in an Instagram story, and he went live. He said, quote, "Listen, I loved Walter Hamada. I loved him as a boss. I loved him as a human being, and I hope to work with him wherever he goes. But I couldn't have hand-chosen two better people to be the people that are now helping to guide where the DC Universe is going. At this point right now, I'm still that character. I have not had any outgoing conversations with the bosses. We have a movie that's literally coming out in March. I have no idea what's going to ultimately happen to me. I think I'm in a pretty good position," end quote. So I do think this is him probably trying to, and this came out right after the big trending of fire James Gunn and fire Peter Safran, came out with this video. And I do think this is the studio trying to sell the film and not let that news get out yet before the movie's even out of, you're not going to be in Shazam 3 or in any of these future films, because that'll further kill that box office. So I think they're keeping that bit of news until after the film releases, just like they did with Black Adam.
It sure sounds like, very diplomatic, and this is also one of those movies that got pushed back, like it was supposed to have come out for Christmas. We got part of that reshuffle. I mean, I enjoyed Shazam. There's a lot of things in there that spoke to me, and like my upbringing as far as like being a family that my parents were foster parents, my sister's adopted, so there was like family dynamic stuff in there that spoke to me, and it spoke to adoptive families. So adoptive kids are routinely like thought of as like a joke for in a movie, whenever there's something aberrant behavior, they kind of like laugh it off as like, well, he's adopted. And this is one of those rare cases where they presented adoptive family in a positive light, and is a source of strength and diversity. And I enjoyed the heck out of that movie. And I'm looking forward for the next one. If we don't get any more Zachary Levi Shazam, I'm okay with it, because I've had two movies that one I've definitely enjoyed, and glad that they didn't tie too deeply into Black Adams.
He was probably going to get fired as well, right? Do you think there's really no reason? And just to play devil's advocate a little bit, if I were Gunn, I would see no reason to bring Zachary Levi on if you're already rebooting the universe.
Well, I mean, we are having some things that were being kept on, but we don't know exactly what those things are. I wouldn't bet that they're keeping him, that they are going to reboot it, just because, well, the big hook at the end, one of the big hooks at the end of Shazam was the appearance, yet not appearance, of Henry Cavill's Superman. But then again, they did that the same style of like, faceless cameo of that Superman at the end of Peacemaker. So who knows? It's hard to say like what's going to be kept and what's going to go. I mean, rumored that Jason Momoa is no longer going to be Aquaman after the next movie, and they're going to make him Lobo. And then you've got Ezra Miller. He's done when the Flash movie movie eventually comes out. So they're going to have to like recast him. So it's all a lot of smoke and mirrors right now, and we don't know what to think. And I don't, until a definitive like 10-year plan or whatever that plan is that James Gunn says they're going to announce after the new year, is actually like laid out. But then again, DC's laid out a 10-year plan before, and wow, how that never came to happen. So waiting on that Cyborg movie.
Yeah, we would have seen it by now. It would have been rebooted. The whole universe would have been rebooted by now. They could have had what they wanted. It's a shame. Yeah, we're going to find out exactly what's happening. I agree. I don't think Zachary is probably going to stay on. They're probably not going to keep him on. And there's rumors of Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman appearance in this film that got cut recently because they're no longer going in that direction. After Gunn and Safran were brought on, plans definitely changed. That's when they got rid of Henry Cavill. So that's when they cut the Batfleck's appearance in Aquaman 2. That the rumor is they cut his appearance, which we knew was happening. That was on Instagram this year. And now that Gal Gadot's appearance in Shazam has also been cut. So there's all these changes to these films that are cutting it from the Snyderverse and really letting those open-ended stories kind of go, because they were probably like, hey, look what's happening here. Now they're meeting Wonder Woman. Something's going to happen in Shazam 3. Who knows what it would have been, but they're definitely ending these stories so that they can move forward with that 10-year plan. And I know so far Gal Gadot has not been formally let go. And from what I've seen on Twitter, Gunn has been like, those are just rumors. That's not true or whatever. But she's the only remaining piece so far from the original Snyderverse that has not been let go from his plans. And I do think it's a matter of time. I think it will happen. But for the most part, it's looking like a straight full reboot, except for, I guess, Peacemaker, right? He could keep that if he wants to. He probably will, and just not reference the old characters.
They were long before he was hired for this. Like, he was supposed to go into production on the second season of Peacemaker, and I think there was like a planned spinoff as well. I don't know if it was focusing on Vigilante or one of the other characters, but yeah, there was supposed to be a second season of Peacemaker that I think that was supposed to be his project after 3.
Gotcha.
Like, I don't know how that's all going to work out now. I don't see him getting behind the director's camera now that he's running a studio. I'm still kind of amazed that he's planning on writing the Superman reboot movie. Like, when do you got time for that when you're building a whole universe?
That's what Maceo was saying. He was like, who does that as like a leader or a Feige person, or as you're going to be the head of this, and also I'm going to write this. And also Maceo was like, he's going to direct that shit too. You just watch. And I'm like, probably. You're right. But he has time to be on Twitter all day to argue with fan bases and to hint little things here and there. He's apparently got plenty of time on his hands.
Elon Musk has got plenty of time too, and somehow he's running it. He's running like 3 huge companies, and he still has time to tweet all day too. So
sure.
I don't know. Maybe I don't have the zeros in my bank account to pay someone to do that.
Exactly right. Well, when Shazam 2 does come out, and you can help talk about it when you come on. I know you're not boycotting Warner Brothers Discovery like some of us are, so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on someone who's not as against these movies as I am.
I mean, we can talk about it another day. I don't want to bog down the year-end show with it, but like I have my reasons, but a lot of it boils down to the Riggs and Murtaugh, I'm too old for this shit kind of mentality. I've had my days of boycotting stuff, and I'm just distracted by other things. So, but we'll talk. That's a story for another podcast.
Perfect. And that does round out our news for the week, but don't forget, we've got our year-end stuff, and we will touch more on the Warner Brothers Discovery merger towards the end. But here is a Patreon comment this week from Adrian. He said, quote, and referencing last week's episode, quote, I was in 7th grade when Pokemon came out. I wasn't a loyal fan. If the anime was on, I watched it, but I never got into the Pokemon games and trading cards. The only game I like is Pokemon Snap. I am sad that Ash's story is coming to an end, though. With Sonic Prime, I'm watching it out of curiosity. I am getting tired of these multiverse stories. I like that Sonic cartoon where they all live on an island doing mundane tasks. I think that's Sonic Boom. Regarding the Snyderverse, I'm living vicariously through Daniel. If he has hope, then so do I. I want Warner Brothers Discovery to fail so bad that they have no choice but to license out their DC characters to, for example, Netflix, so that Zack can fully realize his vision for his DC universe. End quote. I think that's a best case scenario at this point. Obviously, Netflix likes Zack a lot. I don't know if they'd be willing to, but like he said, if it fails so bad that they're like, look, who's willing to pay us to use these characters, then that is certainly a possibility. But I did laugh when I read this of, if he has hope, then so do I. That's a big responsibility. Like I have been more optimistic in recent months in spite of everything that's going on. However, yeah, I know nothing. Like take it from me. I know nothing, and he's not saying I do, but I just want to make that clear that although I do have hope, I just don't want anyone else to be disappointed by it, because I've been fooled by Clay Staub, for example. He had the end of the year pot roast that never came true, and I was disappointed. I was hugely disappointed, and he never referenced it again, and I was like, damn, we were fucking baited. And that felt kind of bad because he was an assistant unit director for Zack Snyder. So I've had my feelings hurt quite a bit this year, but yeah, I mean, I've got plenty to enjoy still, and I definitely have not lost hope as far as what's going to happen with the future of Zack Snyder or the DC, the far future of the DC universe, at least.
I don't know, man. It's been so weird this year with news that I've had that more people put their hopes on me before, and it's weirdly, even on a little thing, it is weird. You do feel a little bit of pressure because you're like, oh man, what if this thing doesn't turn out, or if I lose hope in this thing happening? Like, what's that going to do to that other person who put their faith in me? So there is a bit of responsibility there, but you also have no control over anything that is going on over there. It's the classic, like, tots and pears. I want this thing. I hope this thing happens, but I got to look back on like what you did enjoy. Like, that stuff is still there. It's not, unless you get a time machine, like, that stuff still exists. You can still enjoy that stuff. You can enjoy those things that that happen. As far as like what's coming, 2 years ago, I could have told you something, but the only thing I've been able to predict with Warner Brothers this year is that, like, shit's only getting started.
That's true. Mastradamus did tell us that.
I did I did say I wasn't expecting it so soon after the last time I was on, not counting the Dio podcast, but I did say that we're going to have our Kevin Feige before the end of the year. And like literally 2 days later, the news broke.
So true. Yeah. We just got to keep voting with our dollar. And that goes with everyone, regardless of, whether you and I agree on what's good or what's not good. If you enjoy it, support it with your dollar. That's why on YouTube and on Facebook, I was showing my copies of the Snyder Cut that I have, like the different international versions. And someone's like, 12 copies is kind of a lot. And I'm like, I'm just voting with my dollar, man. I've got the Japanese version. I think there's a Polish version or a Canadian version, thanks to someone from Twitter as well. And it's like, that's all I can do, like you were saying.
I admire your dedication to that.
Yeah, just that's all anyone has to do. If you, like, for example, if you like Born Again, when that comes out, keep watching it multiple times. Just like the Snyder Cut, I streamed it multiple times. Get those numbers up. So that's vote with your dollar. Keep doing it. Support it monetarily if you can, and don't pirate it if you love it. Try to support it if you can.
Speaking of voting with your dollar, if Shazam 2 makes $1 billion, then they're keeping him in the rebooted universe.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, they'd make it work somehow. I was going to say if they're smart, but Warner Bros. Discovery has not made some smart decisions, so I could see them completely being like, okay, no, whatever, that was a fluke.
Well, here's the thing: they've made so many decisions and made so many big moves, since since the merger was finalized, that we really don't know if their decisions are smart or dumb, until actual like projects start coming out from this. So far it's all been slash and burn. We won't see any fruit of this merger for another year or two.
I will agree that a lot of Zaslav's decisions I did agree with up until this Gunn thing, like all the cuts he was making. I'm like, yep, nope, that makes sense. No, I get that. Yep, cut the animation down. Decisions I didn't particularly like, but I understood. The Gunn decision, as I've said on Twitter, is the only one that I was baffled by. But as we're learning, there were other people before Gunn that churned the job down. So I'm starting to kind of get a little bit of a clearer picture as this process has gone on. And I'm sure we'll learn more as the years go by and as more people start to talk that can't talk right now due to NDAs or whatever. Mm-hmm. But let's jump right into our final portion of this week's episode. And thank you, Adrian, for the Patreon comment. Always appreciate those. Let's head into the Broket block, which is what Matt and I have been up to since you last heard us. So before we go into some end of year picks and stories and everything, I do want to do some inside baseball here with the show. If you are not a Patreon backer, you've noticed that the episode has downloaded on a Monday instead of a Sunday. And as I said in the Patreon post, based on stats, most of our broquettes listen to the show on Mondays and Tuesdays anyway. Very few listen to them right away on Sundays. There are some that do, but a majority listen on Mondays and Tuesdays. And based on the current job, my new job that I have, it is a Monday to Friday gig. And normally I used to have Thursday, Fridays off, and that's when I would edit the episodes, upload them, schedule them, put it out on Patreon, all of that. But now I'm working Thursday, Fridays, and now I'm off Saturday, Sundays, just like most people out there, I'm sure, that have like regular jobs, not retail like I was in. And so my editing will be on Saturday, Sundays moving forward. Because of that, I don't have enough time, especially if we record based on the co-hosts' rotating schedule. Some can only record Wednesdays, Thursdays, so that moves my editing time a little bit shorter to I have to edit on Saturday, Sunday, can't get it out on time. So now the episodes will be releasing publicly on Mondays to non-Patreon backers. Patreon backers, you're still getting the episodes early, so this episode right now, for example, released on Patreon in 2022, coming out publicly in 2023. So you're still enjoying this at least a day early before that release. So thank you for your Patreon backing. Just wanted to get that out of the way because I know it can be a big deal for some people if they have their routine, if they have their Sunday routine. I apologize, but from now on, Mondays consistently moving forward, and I appreciate the tolerance as we change the schedule up to one day later. And Matt, on your side, what have you been up to in general before we get into the end of year stuff? How have you been?
Great. Outside of the Dizio podcast, which was amazing. Again, thank you for having me on for that. Just, holiday stuff. I feel like my wife and I have only been having like a weekend to ourselves between October, November, December. It's like we get like one weekend to ourselves a month, it seems right now. And so we've been very, very busy. We have we got married last March. Our big wedding is actually at the end of January. So we've been in a lot of final prep for that. A lot of the fine details for that. I'm still printing out stuff for our centerpiece, which has been a lot more time consuming, both as time consuming and in some respects not as time consuming as I expected. But I've been happy with the results so far, getting into anything. We had some time to work in some gifts for people for the holidays, with that. So that's been fun. We took a Christmas weekend. We took to ourselves. I booked us a weekend at one of the local theme park resorts, just to have a weekend to ourselves, just kind of, relax, decompress, before our big push to all of our final preparations for the wedding at the end of January.
So by the next time you're on, you'll be a married man.
I'm married for the second time.
Yeah.
We never expected our big wedding to be closer to to be like 2 months before our first anniversary. But there are reasons for that. Like my parents can't travel, so my dad hasn't been the greatest of health. So we did a small wedding for them, just like in their living room, kind of an elopement like last March. But the big wedding we've been planning for, coming up almost 2 years. We've been planning the big wedding. Originally, it was, we wanted her brother to be here, and he lives in China. He's been a teacher there for over a decade now, and he hasn't stepped foot in the country in about 7 years. We put the date out for him pretty far because he only really has either his winter break or his summer break to come, and so that put us in January, February, or the summer of Florida, and we did not want to have a hot wedding in the middle of summer in Florida. So that the earliest date that put it was this January, and with all the COVID's not done. It's still going on. They're still doing massive lockdowns in China, the province that he's in, the city that he's in. They just went to virtual teaching till they go on their winter break, and who knows what it's going to be when they come back from winter break. So while the travel restrictions aren't as same for like the country as a whole, his school, they have their own restrictions, and if he were to come here, he would only be able to come here for literally, it'd be like a day and a half of travel for him to get here. He'd only be able to stay for 2 days before he'd have to go back. So he still wouldn't have enough time to quarantine before returning to the classroom. They've had like 2 or 3 like multi-month lockdowns in the past year. So it's like a lot of like putting the whole wedding to this January was for him to hopefully be here. And we honestly didn't know until literally like 2 weeks ago, there was still a chance of him coming. And now, with this latest lockdown and them going virtual teaching again until at least, when they return from winter break, we don't, there's no chance of him coming now. So unfortunately we'll be missing him, but we're going to have a big party. It's going to be a good time.
Well, I hope he's able to visit at some point in the near future. That way you can at least, reconnect in person again. And yeah, it's hairy over there, and as you were saying, so I totally get it. But again, hopefully soon he's able to make it over at least. And you mentioned some anniversaries that are going to be together. So you said your dating and wedding anniversary would be pretty close.
Well, our dating and wedding anniversary are the same day.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, our first kiss was on March 31st, 2019. Then we got engaged in March 31st, 2022. It's not, the year's not done yet. And so like that's gonna be our apartment number is 331. So that the number keeps coming around. So March is a big month for us, and so it's March 31st is multiple anniversaries. Kiss, engagement, wedding.
Yeah, I was going to ask if they were close, if you were just going to celebrate them on one day, but it's literally on one day. So
yeah,
you're all
literally
care
on
of.
one day.
You only have to remember one date, I think, right?
Yeah.
A little harder to screw up, but you got to make sure you don't forget that one. It's only one. Well, that's good, man. I'm happy for you, and it's coming up quick.
Yes,
I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. I've been able to watch a couple films from my library. I had the winter or the Christmas break, so I didn't have to work for there was a 4-day weekend in there. I got to go through a couple of animated movies that I've always wanted to watch that I never saw, and they came out in the 2000s. They were from Disney, actually, back when they were still doing some hand-drawn stuff. Atlantis, The Lost Empire, and Treasure Planet. And these were movies that I always heard people say they had a bit of a cult following, that these were well-made movies that didn't do well in the box office because 3D or regular animation was going out the window and it was moving into 3D. And these were actually good movies. I'm like, yeah, let me check them out. We have access to Disney Plus from our relatives. Leo watches Cars and all that. And I'm like, I guess I'll use it for this. So I checked them out. And Atlantis, The Lost Empire, I did not enjoy it. I didn't think it was good. I was like, all right. But I did like Treasure Planet a lot. And it was only because of, have you seen Treasure Planet?
No, but I do remember watching the trailer for that, and I thought it looked really good. And pre-streaming days, I just missed it, never saw it in the theater, and yeah, it was like pretty much responsible for the end of traditional 2D animation at Disney. I think Lilo and Stitch came after that, and that kind of brought about a little bit of a resurgence. But yeah, Treasure Planet would cost a lot of money to make, and I don't remember reading bad things about it, but it just for whatever reason did not find its audience.
Right. And I think the final nail in that coffin ended up being, I mean, obviously Toy Story was a huge hit, but Princess and the Frog was like another, all right, let's see if, because originally not Frozen, but Tangled was going to be a hand-drawn animated film. And then when Princess and the Frog didn't do well, it underperformed, that's when they churned Tangled into a 3D film. So that was what really changed things for sure. But Treasure Planet did not help. But there's a character in there who's set up as the villain, and that relationship between the villain and the main character, it caught me, man. I'm like, this is mature. This is good shit. This is stuff that as a dad, it's that relationship that I'm like, oh my God, I'm understanding that relationship on a deeper level now than I would have if I had seen this when it first came out. And so I appreciated it because of that. So if that relationship hadn't been in there, or if the villain had been written in a completely different way or in a more traditional way, it would have been less interesting to me. But that got me. That made the movie for me. The rest of the characters, they weren't obnoxious. There was a couple that were, but it wasn't like Atlantis where I didn't like any of the characters in that movie. I was like, they all suck. Like, they're not interesting to me. But Treasure Planet, man, I enjoyed it just because of that. That was a good watch for me. And then I did watch Elf. I'm not a Will Ferrell guy, and I had heard yet again from someone that said, I'm not a Ferrell guy, but I like Elf. And this was on Word Balloon. I heard Franco say, I don't like Will Ferrell, but I love Elf. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll check it out. I got 30 minutes in, and it's not for me. I did not like it. I'm like,
that's one of my my holiday regulars.
Oh, sure. It's beloved. It's a modern Christmas classic, right? A lot of people really enjoy it. Yeah, it was like a definitive. I was 30 minutes in and well past, I think it's Zoe Deschanel that's in there. And I'm like, all right, if I haven't laughed at this point, I'm probably not going to like this movie. And so I'm like, all right, this is it. I'm done. And that's what Kelly told me. She's like, yeah, if you were laughing at that point, the humor is not going to be there for you, and it's not going to be one you'd enjoy. So that's when I turned it off. And I think at that point I had put on Treasure Planet instead. But you liked Elf, and a lot of people do. I saw it on Netflix, The Movies That Made Us. There's a whole episode just on Elf, which is fascinating. I like that episode a lot, even though, again, I didn't like the movie, but the behind the scenes on all of that happening was huge. And I found that really interesting. The last thing I watched is Darren Aronofsky's latest film, The Whale. He's my favorite director. And Kelly and I went to theaters to watch this, and it was playing in very select movies, just like his movies usually do, except for Noah. That was like pretty widely released. I think Black Swan also. And I'm excited. I'm watching it. I'm going to see it. And day one, all of that. Non-spoilers, but this is actually one of my least favorite Aronofsky films. I was kind of surprised that I didn't enjoy it more, because I don't think there's been a movie of his that I didn't like. And I won't say that this is a bad movie. Performance by Brendan Fraser is incredible, right? Brendan Fraser did an amazing job. He deserves all the accolades that he's getting now already from it, plus anything else that's coming for him in the Oscar season. So I totally get it. There was nothing wrong with his. It was all not story perspective, because the story was solid too, except it was based on a play from what I understand. It played on the screen like a play, if that makes any sense. So there were character entrances and character exits that I'm like, this should have been adapted a little bit more as a film rather than like a play where a character suddenly comes in and there's this long back and forth between the two characters like you're on a stage, and then they leave and then another character comes in. And I don't know if I'm the only one that noticed that, but let me know if you saw The Whale, if that bothered you too. And I couldn't let that go, because at the end it says, I think, based on a play by, and then it has the name. And I'm like, okay, I see why, but it shouldn't have, it shouldn't have felt that way. So
he was trying to adapt the play rather than the story.
Yeah, more like that. Yeah, that's kind of what I got out of it. And I think Sweeney Todd did the same thing, but for some reason I didn't feel like Sweeney Todd suffered from that as much as The Whale did. So that was my criticism from it. If you felt differently, let me know. I do still think you should check it out if you're into Aronofsky films, or if you want to watch something a little bit different. It's definitely in there. But I got to say, it's probably one of my least favorite Aronofsky films, which is saying a lot for me, because I really like the guy. I like the director. And I will watch the next thing that he watches. And I do think it's worth watching just for Brendan's performance. But there you go, my on and off review of The Whale without saying much. For the final part of today's show, we've got our end of year picks, since we're talking about movies here. You and I are going to go over it, and we do have a pick from one of the hosts here of our best films of 2022, the host picks. So we'll start off with you, Matt. I've been talking for a while here, so what is your pick for the rules here, so everyone else knows what the stipulations were? It had to be made in 2022, and obviously it had to release in 2022. It couldn't be something like, let's say I would have loved Elf. I loved Elf. That was my favorite one that I saw this year. It doesn't count. Has to come out in 2022. So what was your pick, Matt, and why?
So caveat before that, I used to watch a lot of movies, like a lot of movies. If 4 movies came out in a weekend, I probably watched 3 of those. Fast forward to the last few years, I haven't watched as many movies. I've been watching a lot more series. A lot of that just comes like with, not having the theater experience, or my wife and I tend to love binging shows. So when I was looking through the list of 2022 releases, I saw a lot of movies on that list that I was like, yeah, I meant to see that movie. Yeah, I meant to see that movie. I meant to see that. But yeah, I have at least I don't know, 20 movies out on that list that I fully intended to see and completely forgot that they came out. And just, it's been a very busy year, obviously.
Mhm.
So what I had to pick from what I actually saw that came out this year was very, very small list indeed. So and that's why I don't like best of lists. Like, I like, what's your favorite movie of the year? And so I have my favorite movie that I saw, like, that released in 2022, was Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, just because of the gravity and the weight behind everything that happened with the untimely death, the tragic death of Chadwick Boseman. Didn't know how Marvel was going, or Ryan Coogler was going to handle him passing. There were all kinds of rumors about if they were, the only thing that was clear was that they weren't recasting him. There was going to be a new Black Panther, which the Marvel universe is, in the movies, has has opportunities that they don't often take in the comics, where, like, you have Tony Stark die, he eventually comes back in the comics,
Right.
and so far a lot of these big actors have had their names tied to it, so they're allowing these characters to, like, actually have an endpoint in these movies, which is very divergent from the comics. I mean, for sure, these other characters might come up, might be recast in the future, but so far, they're kind of rolling with, when an actor is so identified with a role, they're just bringing a new character in a similar type role. They're not trying to, like, bring in, someone else saying, this is now Steve Rogers, this is now Tony Stark. They're adapting the story to fit the absence of that actor who has moved on. And fortunately, with Chadwick Boseman, he was someone who was very much in the prime of his career. His career was still climbing. And critically, the first Black Panther movie was one of the more critically well received Marvel movies. And this one, the entire movie, I'm watching it like, what kind of tricks are they going to pull? Are they going to have, like, his hand in there somewhere? Are they going to, have, like, use archival footage or unused footage to kind of work him in there? Are they going to do, like, a, Star Wars, Rogue One thing where they CGI in, Carrie Fisher or other actors? And no, like, every time you thought, like, they were going to, like, a hand was going to pop in there and they were going to show, like, I felt like real pain, like, watching that movie, like real sadness. I don't know if you're familiar with the death of Captain Marvel, like the 80s graphic novel, where they actually, like, had a character, like the original, like, Marvel version of Captain Marvel, the alien Marvel. He dies of cancer. He's someone who, who's fought Thanos. He's fought countless cosmic threats, and ends up dying from cancer. This most brilliant minds of the Marvel universe, they couldn't find a way to save him. This was very much like of that same thing. The movie opens, with them trying to save, T'Challa, and you don't see him on screen. You just see people scurrying around. His genius sister is trying to save him, and that they're not going to save him because Chadwick Boseman passed. But it doesn't stop you from hoping that they're going to find a way, and they don't. And your heart's broken in that moment, and it leads to Angela Bassett turning in, like, as the Queen. She turns in, like, one of the best performances of her career, like a strong, powerful leader who conveys the weight and authority of someone who has had her husband, now her son, and pass away within a span of 7 years. But for T'Challa, like, having gone for 5 years through the events of Infinity War, and we're coming back at Endgame, he basically came back only to die months later. So it's like you feel Chadwick Boseman's, like, passing throughout the entire movie, and they handle it in such a way that it's just, man, it's like you're watching a funeral. You're watching everyone going through grief, and it's just, it feels real. Like, it's all fictional characters, but it feels real because they are mourning Chadwick Boseman throughout the entire movie, and it's not done in a heavy-handed way. It's handled with real depth and artistry. And will it get nominated? I mean, will Marvel try to make pushes for it to be nominated for Best Picture? Yeah. Will it? No. But it has handled with a lot more delicacy and depth of character than I think a lot of people, who casually dismiss, comic book movies. It's handled a lot more with a lot more gravitas than you would think, and it gives you it ends with a little bit of hope at the end. That's just the Chadwick Boseman a part of it all. The introduction of Namor and changing him, his history, instead of like having like Marvel's version of Atlantis, they change it. They have it more embedded with a more Mesoamerican culture. And again, they introduce another culture that is fictional, that feels real, and it feels lived in. And I don't mind the changes that they made of Namor from the comic to the screen. Like, they're changes that make sense in the world that you're seeing. And I thought that Tena Cuerto did an outstanding job. So, obviously, if you haven't seen any of the previous Black Panther or any of his other appearances in there, it's not going to have as much resonance for you. But I thought it was a great eulogy for Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, there was a lot of curiosity as to how they were going to handle that death. And I know there was a big movement to recast Black Panther up until the film's release. There were those fans that wanted Black Panther, the T'Challa character, to continue. And they were saying in honor of him, continue him and all that. But I think it was one of those moments just to sort of, again, put myself in the seat of Disney, of like, damned if you do, damned if you don't type of thing. Because if you recast them, big backlash. If you don't, again, there's a vocal presence against that too. But
they do lay the groundwork for a version of T'Challa to come back later. I'm not going to spoil any end credit scene, but they do lay the groundwork for a future return of T'Challa. And if you ever go watch it, that'll make a lot more sense when you see it. Side note, I have one backup, and it's a nostalgic pick, and it's what I only saw the other day, and it was Christmas Story Christmas, the sequel to A Christmas Story.
How was that? I saw that it was up on HBO Max.
It can't be as good as the original. Mm-hmm. The original is, it plays on in the background all Christmas Day, but it very much there was a lot of nostalgia in there. It was great seeing, like, they brought back not all of as many of the living actors as they could, from like the kids all grown up. The only distraction was like the mom from the original movie. She's still alive, but she chose not to come back. So the mom was different, but it was great seeing Ralphie growing up. It wasn't all slapsticky. For being the 70s, it was very much like now being set in the 70s, because it went forward in time from when Ralphie was a kid. So he's all grown up now. He's got his own kids. It's very much, again, it's not a movie dealing with death and grief in a time when you wouldn't be expecting to. So seeing Ralphie like taking like the final step to becoming like his old man, it was kind of fun. So like, it was a great nostalgic movie. Not as good as the first one, but a way, way, way better follow-up than it had any right to be. And way better than the one that bills itself as A Christmas Story, the official sequel, is subtitled The Official Sequel, which is a red flag. Just stay away from that one.
Well, I'm glad it ended up working out pretty well on this one, because it's one of those films that when they announced it, it's that thing of, do we need this, that people always say? And I think it was Millennial Mike that's like, I mean, we don't need any movie if you want to really get down to it. And he's right, but it's like, yeah, we do need it if it does well. And it sounds like this one, at least you enjoyed it. And I haven't heard anything really super negative about it, honestly. And it's on my queue. I'm going to see it. And I'm glad that, that was your runner up then, right?
Yeah. I like I said, I wouldn't say it was, again, that's why I like favorite movies of the year, not best of, because it's definitely not the best, one of the best movies, but in my heart, it's up there.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. I appreciate you having a couple of picks there. So once again, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, his pick or his favorite, and then followed up by the Christmas Story sequel. So mine is probably no surprise. It's going to be Top Gun Maverick. And The Whale, I thought was going to be it. I'm like, The Whale, that's going to be my favorite movie. I think I said ahead of it releasing, I'm like, that there's no way it's not. And it wasn't. So Top Gun Maverick, and I know I get it. It's a major blockbuster pick, and I've heard that criticism from people on Twitter and all of that. And if I had seen every single movie that released this year, same sentiment that you're kind of going through of maybe I'd have a different pick. There's something I'm watching now with Colin Farrell on HBO Max that I'm in the middle of that I'm really enjoying so far. But out of everything that I have seen, and I did see more this year than I did last year in theaters, I love Top Gun Maverick. I couldn't wait for it to come out on Blu-ray, on 4K. I almost considered buying it digitally because Paramount, man, those guys, they were so good about the fucking release because they're like, all right, it's in theaters. And now it's on exclusive or early on demand. And if you want to see it again, you could either go in theaters or you can rent it for $20. And I'm like, when's it come out on Blu-ray 4K? And they're like, we don't know. And I'm like, you motherfuckers. And then they're like, now it's on rental on demand. So you can watch it a little bit cheaper. I'm like, all right, when's the 4K? And they're like, sometime soon. And then they're like, all right, now it's on Paramount Plus. And I'm like, I don't fucking have Paramount Plus. When's it coming out? And they're like, in 3 months. So they did good in releasing that. They staggered those launches. So they had different spikes as to when they could release it. And they almost got me because that's how much I like this movie. I almost rented it early. I almost bought it early, even though I had it eventually pre-ordered for 4K. But I waited and watched it in 4K with Kelly. She and I sat down and I couldn't wait to rewatch it. And I have reviewed it on here before, but just very briefly, the way they filmed a lot of these action scenes, it's not a full CGI fest like you would see more commonly from some of the bigger studios. With Tom Cruise being on board and Paramount, they really took the time to make this feel like a movie from the 80s, from that era, from Top Gun. They don't, as we've said before on here when we talked about it, me and one of the other couple of hosts, there were no, we need to have these check marks and make sure it didn't feel like the focus of the movie. It felt like they were honoring Top Gun and making a movie that was very simple, easy to consume. And normally, again, I don't find those movies as interesting in the long term, but it was shot in a way that it's like, holy shit, they got these amazing shots, these aerial shots, these shots of them inside the cockpits, which I get that not all of those were actually them flying or anything like that, but they made it look like it was. And it was done in an artistic way when the planes are breaking up at the beginning of the movie, when you see far shots of him flying, shots that were not necessary for a Top Gun sequel, but they did it. And I will say that Top Gun Maverick is a better movie than Top Gun. I enjoyed it more than Top Gun. I thought it was filmed better than Top Gun. And it is my favorite movie of 2022.
Who would have thought Top Gun would have, like a sequel to Top Gun would have been like one of the top movies of 30 years, almost 40 years after the original.
This is what I'm saying. I kept saying that shit when it came out. When it made $1 billion, I was like, who would have guessed that this would have happened? And I'd have coworkers like, I saw it happening. I'm like, bullshit. Everyone said this was going to fail. They're like, why a movie 30 years after? Like, no one's going to care. Why are they making a sequel to Top Gun? Hollywood's run out of ideas. I kept hearing it all. And look at that, $1 billion fucking dollars.
Where's the Dorian Gray portrait of Tom Cruise in someone's attic? Because like, the way that guy is aged is, he definitely looks he's aged, but he does not look like a man in his 60s.
Exactly right. And have you seen Maverick yet?
No, because like my wife still hasn't seen the original Top Gun, and she doesn't want to see Maverick until she's seen Top Gun. Yeah, and we just haven't fit in the schedule yet. But I'm very curious, and I chuckled because I just read this morning that it's either on YouTube or Paramount Plus, but they put together like a 3-hour loop of the volleyball scene from the sequel.
Well, I was just going to bring that up because you mentioned Tom Cruise being a vamp. He's an Interview with the Vampire again. It's Lestat. That's what it is. And yeah, there's a volleyball scene in this, and you see him, but they do some camera tricks to hide his like waist area, but you can tell he still works out. They get him from like the chest up to show that he's still in shape and everything. So yeah, I mean, for like you said, for his age, he definitely maintained it and did it for Top Gun Maverick and so on. So very good movie. I'm excited for you and your wife eventually to see it, the first and the second one. And yeah, you're right. She's right. She should see the first one. Not like you wouldn't appreciate Maverick or anything like that, because I do think it's awesome, but there's some slight connections there that do play a lot heavier if you've watched Maverick, kind of like Black Panther, like you were talking about with Wakanda Forever. Mm-hmm. One of the submissions we got from one of our hosts here, Sam, on Discord, he came through and his pick was Dragon Ball Super Superhero. The reason, he said, quote, because it was the most fun I had and I was pleasantly surprised by how well everything worked. CGI, the comedy, the return to a more small-scale traditional Dragon Ball story, plus Gohan and Piccolo getting their time in the sun." End quote. So Sam being the now resident weeb of the show and the Discord, and he picked an anime, so it makes sense. And I liked Superhero, and it was pretty well done. And I never got to talk to him about it, but I asked him ahead of time. I'm like, when you watch it, tell me this isn't the plot to BVS in many ways. There's a lot of connections there. So I'll be curious to discuss that with him when he does come on, and that'll be out pretty soon via Funimation. But thanks for submitting that pick, Sam, and Matt as well. And to you on the other side, let us know what was your favorite film of 2022 or your pick for best movie, whichever one you want to prefer. Let us know on Twitter, on Discord, Patreon, whatever way you can reach us on. And there's a link at thereasonsimbroke.com of everywhere you can find us. So this last bit of the show, we have something you added on here, the end of year story of the year. And you wanted to touch on the Discovery Warner merger and the changes.
It's been a wild flipping year for Warner Brothers. I mean, if you're trying to dial back, like find like one singular story that kind of like dominated, the year for as far as like the news we talk about, how many episodes do you have where you didn't talk about something that was Warner Brothers Discovery related? That merger, like even before that, they were constant topic of discussion because it's a DC focused podcast, but for very controversial reasons. Well, I mean, there was a lot of hope going in with the finalization of the merger, thinking that Zaslav was going to bring back immediately get the keys to the castle and say, okay, the Snyderverse is coming in. And it wasn't until I think, when they finally announced James Gunn and Peter Safran as the heads of DC Studio, where that nail is fairly definitively in that coffin. If there's ever any hope of the Snyderverse returning, it's probably going to be his projects, outside of it, probably be like print media projects, or it'll be, stuff for HBO Max. But I feel as far as the feature film stuff that, unless James Gunn's vision, just tanks completely, and we won't know if his vision is really a success for at least, he signed a 4-year, a 4-year deal, and how many movies is he going to put out in that time? Is going to be 2-3 tops, probably, unless they fast track a bunch of stuff. We really won't know how that'll shake out for another year or so. But it's just dominated the news cycle in for good and bad reasons. I might have to file a health insurance claim for Whiplash for how much things have gone back and forth this year. 1 week you think that, okay, Henry Cavill's coming back for Man of Steel, Man of Steel 2. There it is right there, a video of him saying it, and that the studio cleared him to say it. And not even 2 months later, oops, guess it's not happening. Which, okay, have you seen Bland Adam?
No.
I'm glad I didn't have to pay money for it.
Okay. I remember you being kind of excited for it, but no good, huh?
I was only excited for I really wanted to believe The Rock's passion for it. He'd been trying for so long to make this movie. He made it out like this was a passion project, when the trailer started coming out for it and you started seeing more promotional material for it, I very much was getting the feeling that I had when I saw Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. The first, right in the opening crawl to the first minute or two of footage, I've got a bad feeling about this. That was my feeling the entire movie. It's just it was structurally, it was bad. I felt like the Just Society wasn't well cast. The humor they were trying to put in there was didn't click like it does in Marvel's comedies. But it's if this movie had come out, when Venom came out, a lot of the reviews of that would say that as far as the comic movies go right now, it's average. But if it come out in early 2000s, it would have been the hottest thing around. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel Black Adam was. If this come out in 2002, 2003, probably would have blown my socks off. But there's been so much content since then that like this is trying to, it just felt disconnected, disjointed. The Rock, for whatever reason, in flashback scenes to ancient Kahndaq, had an accent, but the second he shows up in modern day, he's speaking perfect non-accented American English, knows colloquialisms, and picks things up like way faster than he should have for someone who's been basically in a tomb for thousands of years. There's so much about the movie that just doesn't make sense. And I wanted to, it's one of those movies where I wanted to like it, but no joke, the best scene of the movie was the mid-credit scene when Henry Cavill shows up. And I was like, yeah, because I was excited for him. I was excited for that.
What a shame, man. Yeah, and I remember you saying, you're like, I want to like the movie. I want to like it, and leading up to it. So you finally watched it. Yeah, it is such a weird, bizarre, has been a bizarre. I mean, if you had talked Daniel at the January 2022 to Daniel December 2022, if I would have told him, look, this is what's going to happen, it's like, bullshit. No way that's going to happen. And it's like, it's incredible. And who knows by December of 2023, like what kinds of major changes or stories we'll have by then. It's just kind of amazing to see. And I've said it before, I may not like the changes, but it'll be fascinating as hell. It'll be interesting. And that's why we still cover it on here, because it is very interesting to watch. And even though I'm not supporting these projects, who knows what's going to happen by next December? Who knows? Maybe I will be championing Warner Brothers Discovery. I don't see it happening, but as we've seen, crazier things have happened.
I mean, we're 6 weeks into the James Gunn, Peter Safran regime. So Warner Brothers Discovery could also be the top story of 2023. I mean, without any plan or definitive projects like having been announced yet, I mean, they're gonna slow drip that. They're gonna give you a general idea of like what's coming, and they're gonna wait for to make a big splash, a big presentation. So they're gonna slow drip stuff, but come San Diego or if they've got a version of D23. They're gonna be looking to make a big media splash to just try to turn as many heads and make as big announcement. I mean, I wouldn't doubt if at San Diego in Hall H, you've got James Gunn who's announcing, and bringing on stage your new Superman, your new Batman, your new whatever, right after the Flash has come out. They're gonna be cautious and slow drip this stuff, until basically the last of these previous movies have come out. But Warner Brothers Discovery could be, their news could be dominating 2023 as well. And I'm hoping it's for more positive reasons than the chaos that's been 2022.
Well, I will say, if I were, and I'm not rooting for Gunn, I'm not going to be supporting him, I'm not going to be watching these. In fact, I do hope that he never gets to that 10-year ending. But if I were him, and you mentioned the 4-year contract, if I were him, I'd say, I'd announce as you get close to your end of your 4 years, I'd then announce we're getting Nightwing, we're getting Red Hood, those solo movies, but that'll be on my 5th year. I'd do something like that just to be like, oh, you want those? Just to try to get some, I don't know, get the ball rolling on a contract re-up.
I mean, it's all going to come down to how well, because they've said the Superman's his top priority. So if that first Superman movie that, that he's writing, if it brings in $1 less than Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, that's the end of him. If it brings in $1 more, then he's gonna be hailed as the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, and I would say if by you're right, results are going to be the main thing, and that's why, again, vote with your dollar. If you want that, great. If you don't. But I would have his first major crossover right before that 4-year contract, because that's going to be he's hoping, I'm sure, a box office success, and then you can turn that over to Zaslav and be like, look, I'm on a roll here, and then get.
Well, they have been making hints towards building to Crisis of on Infinite Earths, and he's thrown a couple of Kingdom Come images out there on Twitter, and nothing piques my interest more as a teaser than throwing out some Alex Ross Kingdom Come artwork.
Yeah, I think that's why they were Henry Cavill and Dwayne Johnson were saying we had talks about appearances in the future and Brock was like, in this multiverse that we live in. So I'm sure there was something in there when they discussed it further down the line, there's going to be a crossover between universes, and maybe then there'll be a spot for you. But for now, we're not going to do a Black Adam 2. That's what I got from it. And again, I don't care, but that's kind of what it sounds like there's going to be a bunch of multiverse happening in the lead up, and they're probably going, if they make it that far, they're going to try to get some of these legacy actors to at least make a supporting role at some point in those in that major crossover, whatever it may be, whatever they call it.
I mean, that's what they did with the TV version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, so I can't imagine they're not going to try to do that with a movie version.
Exactly right. And I think that's one of the things Hamada supposedly said they wanted to do. So it doesn't shock me that they're going to try to continue that, at least his version of it, at some point in the future. But there you have it. That has been, and I agree with you, that's been the Whiplash story of the year. More to come as we continue into 2023, but also more of what we enjoy, as we've discussed earlier. Some mergers happening, gaming still happening, changing of the landscape as we still continue through what is, like you were mentioning, COVID closures and pandemic stuff that we're still seeing fallouts of, and that's all changing the world for the better or worse. There's some good and bad happening out of this. So all of that is affected by the things we do enjoy as well. Some of these escapisms that we do have, we're getting more content and less on some ends, and we're going to continue that into the new year. So Matt, I want to thank you. I want to thank the rest of our hosts as well for a year of support and helping host it. I know you had mentioned the Dan DiDio interview. Again, thank you for being on for that one. That was a lot of fun, and hopefully we can do more interviews in 2023. So Matt, please let them know where they can find you. And again, thank you and the rest of the hosts for helping make 2022 happen.
As always, a pleasure being on here. I appreciate, spending this time talking about things that we like or make us pull our hair out. And again, grateful for the invite to interview Dan DiDio. He's had quite a lot to promote, and it was great hearing about his history across media. And people want to talk to me, they can find me pretty much on Facebook most of the time at facebook.com/Madner.
Perfect. Thank you very much. There will be a link on everywhere you can find Matt as well in the description of today's show. And to listen to the episode with Matt, Dan DiDio, and I, there's actually a special section on the website, thereasonsimbroke.com. Click on guests, and you will see all of the guests that we've had, industry guests that we've had on the show throughout the years. The most recent one being Dan DiDio right near the top there. So click on that. It'll lead you right to the episode. But also, if you want to submit some TCG cards, whether it's Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, baseball cards, One Piece, that's one of the latest TCGs right now, head on over to treefroggrading.com. You can see an example of their different of the slabs that they do compared to some of the other competitors. But I love Tree Frog's presentation. If you go to treefroggrading.com and use the discount code BROKE, you will get a 5% discount on your submissions, on your full order. So that's, once again, discount code BROKE. Thank you once again for joining us this year and hopefully into the new year. I've been Daniel, joined by Matt, and Brokehead Core, all will be well. What do you hope to see out of either what I want to say is, what improvements do you want to see compared to 2022 as far as entertainment, like getting back into more movie theaters? Do you hope to try to catch more movies this year? Do you have any kind of entertainment resolutions that you're hoping to meet in this coming year?
I am hoping to get to see more movies. Again, it's going to be another busy year because I know that it's weird that most of my 2023 is already planned out with, we've got, the wedding at the end of January, and my birthday is 2 weeks later. Then we may be going to, for a friend's birthday to New Orleans in the beginning of March. And then the end of March is our anniversary. And then, we haven't even had our honeymoon yet. It doesn't look like that's going to happen until May. Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out where to fit movies in there, but I'm trying to watch some, my wife has kind of been my entertainment resolution. So she's introduced me to some things that I normally wouldn't have gone out of my way to watch and that I found to enjoy. So I'm hoping to be a little bit more open-minded about projects that I normally wouldn't have gone to see. We just watch the first season of Yellow Jackets, and normally that wouldn't be my cup of tea, but like that was a outstanding first season. But especially after looking at the list of 2022 movies, I am definitely hoping to see more movies this year, whether it's in the theater or at home. We've got a Cinemark like that, their movie club thing with some credits on there. So like, I'm hoping that we can at least like go see a movie every month or something like that. Definitely more regularly, not just for like an event movie or a big release, just to find something a little bit more odd to support. We're gonna be doing less theme parks in 2022. We're kind of burned out a little bit. We're done with the Disney parks for a while, for the foreseeable future. We can't really give up Universal because those are the parks that kind of brought it, that pretty much introduced us to each other. But we're looking at moving. Our lease is going to be up in summer, and we're looking at moving, and where we're moving, it's we're not going to be able to go to the theme parks as often as we would like. So hopefully that'll give us a little bit more opportunity to find more entertainment options than we're used to, or different entertainment options. But it's already it's a jam-packed 2023, and the ball hasn't even dropped yet.
Yeah, it's going to be a very busy one as well. I agree. I'm with you there. We're expecting our second little one in April. So there's going to be another layer of changes, right? And we've been through it once with Leo, and so I do think it'll be an easier transition into that. It's like, okay, we kind of know a little bit,
How old's Leo now?
He's 5. So he's going to
be... That's like a great spread in ages between them.
He's excited, and
that's the age difference between my sister and I.
My brother and I too, right? I think he's going to be a great little helper. He's already excited about it, and there'll be some challenges and some difficulties. Of course, we've never had multiple kids, and not to say that our attention will be split, but we'll have to find different ways to adjust our times with Leo and with Sophia and with each other too. So that's going to be a big resolution for me. Is learning how to be a dad to, I guess, 4 if you count the dogs, but to two little humans. So
looking forward to it. Sounds exciting.